Hello everyone and welcome to the first semi-final of the World Championship 2013. Ben Stark against Shahar Shenhar. Let's meet the two players.
Ben Stark, United States, 61 pro points last season, playing red, blue, white in standard and red, blue, white in modern.
Shahar Shenhar, Israel, 53 pro points last season, playing blue, white, red in standard and playing blue, white, red control in modern.
So there are the two players. They are into action and we are underway with a land on either side, and you are going to see plenty of land in play in this one. Luis, it's very hard for a beginner viewer to appreciate quite what they're seeing because there are a lot of visual cues that are missing in this matchup compared to the typical game of Magic we might play at F&M. What are we going to be looking out for during the next best 3 out of 5?
Yeah, it's a little different than what you're used to. First of all, because there aren't very many creatures in play. Second of all, because their lands also double as kill conditions. As you can see, they both have Celestial Colonnade in play, and that card often ends the game for this deck. Both players are kind of struggling to figure out how many lands they can get into play, and then use that to resolve, powerful spells like Sphinx's Revelation.
BDM, I know that you are carefully looking through these two deck lists, and it's like it's a scientific excavation that you're doing to my right here, and that's because the margins here are going to be very, very tight.
Yeah, it looks like, and again, I'm just going to, because sometimes the lands can be out of order, it looks like it's 28 lands for Shahar to 26 for Ben.
Yeah, I haven't actually counted the lands. I think that they're like very close to equal. Either it's like 26 to 28.
Right.
Somewhere in that range.
The big difference seems to be no Vendilion Click, no Restoration Angel in Ben Stark's deck, which is a card we see in Shahar's deck.
Yeah, and as you can see, the opening turns of these games are all land drops, and the reason being that, again, both players are, the most important thing to resolve is a Sphinx's Revelation, and Shahar has a slightly more aggressive build with those Angels and Vendilion Clicks.
Yeah, even though this is a control mirror, both of these players playing very quickly. Shahar said he really wants to learn how to play more quickly and confidently, like Ben Stark when I talked to him earlier.
Yeah, Ben is a good person to learn those things from. Ben is not a slow player.
Quickly and correctly, I believe, were the terms he used.
And super important because we saw any number of matches this weekend in the blue, white, red mirrors that went to time, and you ended up with draws between nations.
So this is impressive. You realize this is like turn 9 or 10 of the game. 0 spells have been cast. Here we are breaking the ice with a Vendilion Click.
So 3-1, Flash Flyer.
Turn 9.
That's the first non-land play of the match.
One of the reasons Vendilion Click is so important in this matchup, and others, but mainly this one, is that it's an instant speed threat. It also gives Shahar perfect information of Ben's hand besides the one card he then draws off Vendilion. Or it's something, in this case, Shahar actually chose to Vendilion Click himself, which is also an option.
Right, especially when you can have creature control cards in your hand in a matchup where you're just not going to have creatures to deal with.
Yeah, Shahar's more than happy to put a Lightning Bolt or something along those lines, Path to Exile, on the bottom of his library to draw an extra card and have another chance at hitting those all-important land drops.
So there's Lightning Helix from Ben, because I would like to get rid of that 3-1. And Shahar will say, sure, that's fine. What are the kind of spells that you are going to fight over? Because by and large, that felt pretty straightforward. You just go, yeah, sure, well done. 1 for 1. I'd already done what I wanted to do with the Vendilion Click. What are the spells that we fight over here?
The main spell, like I said, was Sphinx's Revelation. There's also Cryptic Commands and then Planeswalkers. Ben Stark has 1 Gideon Jura, and Shahar Shenhar has 1 Johnny Vengeance. And either of those Planeswalkers can't dominate the game if they're left unchecked.
Yeah, and a Johnny Vengeance can make the other side of the matchup in a control mirror very uncomfortable very quickly.
Yeah. Another key interaction here is Tectonic Edge and Celestial Colonnade. You really cannot Tectonic Edge any land but Celestial Colonnade in this matchup.
Right, because that's your essentially free kill spell.
Yeah, you can sometimes Tectonic Edge their Tectonic Edge if they're tapped out and can't use it, but for the most part, you're going to want to save all your edges for their Colonnades, and in this case, there is 1 more Colonnade than Tectonic Edge in the main decks of these two decks.
Yeah, so they've got the full 4 Celestial Colonnade, turning it into your 4/4s, and then only 3 ways to deal with them in terms of the non-basic Destroyer Tectonic Edge.
And it's to Ben's credit that after board, he has an extra Tectonic Edge. He has the 4th.
Yeah, it's not that often you see lands in the sideboard, but the fourth one could come in for Ben Stark.
You see it once in a while in the control decks where they want to actually not only sideboard land to be able to, combat like creature lands, but they also want to be able to have more land, right? For game two.
Hitting your land drops is so important. So you get double duty out of a land that does something. Like we saw in the team rounds where Belgium was siding in Cavern of Souls and Aetherlings in the control matchups.
I want a screen capture of that. Gideon Jura, Lightning Bolt, Mana Leak, Sphinx's Revelation, Cryptic Command, Cryptic Command. Oh yeah, I could take that hand anytime.
Notice that it doesn't have any lands, and Shahar's running low too. Both players went up to 9 unimpeded, which doesn't always happen, but once they got there, they both are now having to cast spells. You see Shahar casting a pair of Lightning Helices at Ben's face, because it's better than discarding.
Mm-hmm.
And to some extent, maybe you can get your opponent to discard a counter spell.
Yeah, they would rather not if they can avoid it, but if you're just going to discard it anyway, and here we have Ben's version of that.
I'm going to discard my Electrolyze whilst drawing a card and dealing you some damage.
Just cycle my Electrolyze.
Ben also has an extra Electrolyze. All these little edges actually do add up, and this is why we think that Ben might have the edge here.
It's also, though, it's very tempting to get lulled into ignoring the life totals because it's very hard to see when essentially they are, like you say, almost discarding those spells. It's very hard to say, oh yeah, 1725, it makes a difference. But there's going to come a point in the game where the number of turns someone has to survive is going to change based on how those little life swings have come along.
An end of turn Snapcaster Mage pulled a spell snare out of Shahar's hand.
And as you see in some mirrors, and this one more than most, you have these different card slots that are meant for other cards. And in this case, you have Spell Snare, which is basically meant to counter Snapcaster Mage. That is, much like the Tectonic Edge, Celestial Colin interaction, really what you want to do with all your Spell Snares is counter
Is that what you're
Snapcaster.
thinking about when you put that card in your deck in the first place, or are you really thinking about Tarmogoyf?
It's mostly for like Tarmogoyf, Dark Confidant, those creatures, but in this matchup, Snapcaster Mage is by far the best target for your Spell Snares.
So Snapcaster Mage appears and Electrolyze out of the graveyard from Stark to aim at the face. Shahar will use his Electrolyze, in some senses rather more profitably, to dispense with the Snapcaster Mage.
And both players are busy cycling cards, getting a little bit of damage through. And at the end, sometimes you have one player at 24 and the other player at 11. In this case, they both have had Lightning Helix, but when one player draws 3 Helixes versus 3 Bolts, you actually do end up in a situation where a player is within striking distance of a Celestial Colonnade.
Feel free to wander away, go get a cup of coffee if you're watching at home. Settle in for a little while here.
Yeah, I mean, there are haymakers, that, Sphinx Revelation being the main one, but the game actually ending still is not that close in this particular match.
You see that we mentioned the Planeswalkers, one on each side within the deck. You've got Gideon Jura for Ben Stark, and he has that there in his hand.
I assume Gideon Jura just attacks in this matchup whenever it's play.
Yeah, it buys you
doesn't really
time
do anything
against
else.
Colonnade, so
Okay.
sometimes you can survive for a few turns against a Celestial Colonnade. Here, Shahar is likely to fight over Gideon with a double Mana Leak. Mana Leak also loses a lot of value later in the game. So, once you have looking at Ben with his 10 lands in play, there aren't that many spells you can leak, so Shahar might want to just, play a leak, force Ben to tap 3 lands, play another leak, counter Gideon. He does have to be sensitive to the fact that leak is good against Sphinx Revelation at almost any point. As you can see.
That seems to be what he's considering here. He's like, is this where I want to make a stand?
Right, and if we look back at Shahar's hand, he really only has the 2 Mana Leaks as far as interactive cards. He's got a hand that would be amazing against an aggressive deck. It would just kill everything all the time. But with Ben at 16, those 3 Bolts and the Ajani don't quite do enough damage.
And also, if you do fight here, part of the benefit, presumably, to fighting is that you then get to untap when your opponent's used a lot of their resources, and then you reload perhaps with a big Sphinx's Revelation of your own, which, of course, this time, Shahar doesn't have available to him.
Yeah, if he draws one, he certainly would like to cast it, but he does have the Ajani, so he's able to, just play the Ajani. If you're out of counters, a lot of times you're better off just playing your threats and hoping they stick. People always treat matchups like this like your opponent always has the counter because there are so many, but, sometimes they just don't have it, and if you trade your card for the counter, that might have happened later, but if they don't have the counter, you can really pull ahead. Another interesting interplay is the fetch lands. Ben left his 2 Arid Mesas and Scalding Tarns in play for the last 5 or 6 turns, not wanting to sack them because he wants to draw the lands. Later, once he does not want to draw any more lands, he'll start just cracking those and just getting all the lands out of his deck as fast as he can.
Right, and what you're talking about there is if he activates them, he's going to thin his deck of lands.
Yes.
And more likely to draw spells and less likely to draw the lands that he wants.
It's not a huge effect percentage-wise. People tend to overvalue it, but
But
it's
you've been
still
stressing
non-zero.
it in this matchup that it's all about tiny edges.
Yeah. And,
So-
I mean, if the percentage is very small, but you're going to draw off the same deck 10 turns in a row you expect, then that actually adds up to, an actual game changer. The other win condition, your opponent's fetch lands. You don't want to end up where Paulo did at Worlds in 2010. He actually cracked a fetch land going to 5 when a Cruel Ultimatum was on the stack and realized he didn't have a land to get, so then it resolved and he died. Wow. He luckily top 8'd that one, otherwise he would probably have never forgotten it. Right, as is, it's kind of a funny anecdote. When you actually get eliminated by one of those things, you never can let it down.
He's probably not listening right now, right?
Yeah, definitely not.
Or even if he's listening, I don't think he's laughing.
Nah, Paulo's actually very willing to laugh at himself when he does silly things.
Yeah.
Which is good, because otherwise he'd spend a lot of time not laughing.
Wow.
The truth is, this actually feels strange without having Paulo here. This is a Pro Tour and Paulo's not here.
Yep. Yeah. Are we going to see, is Shahar going to go sort of aggro with his burn here at this point?
If he's double counterspelling the Gideon, that is his plan. Because he could have actually killed Gideon with all 3 lightning bolts. Once Gideon +2s up to 8, you can actually triple bolt it. But I think he'd rather keep Ben at a virtual 5 life, which actually puts him fairly close. And if he resolves a Johnny, that actually puts Ben at 2. Which could actually leave Ben unable to crack those 2 fetch lands.
That we talked about, absolutely. Another little viewing tip if you're fairly new to this kind of Magic. It's worth saying that sometimes there are cards on the table that aren't actually in play yet. Sometimes they sit there for a little while the players decide, is this actually going to happen? So although we saw that Gideon on the screen there for quite a long time, actually that was all part of, can I have this Gideon?
Technically, it was hovering about an inch off the table on the stack.
But physically, Ben had things to do with his fingers. So here's a Johnny Vengeant. So we've now seen both Planeswalkers.
This time locking down one of Ben's Celestial Colonnades.
Right, and if somehow he can get that Johnny to its ultimate, he gets to destroy all of Ben's lands.
Yeah, it's -7 for that to destroy all lands target player controls.
Johnny Vengeant pulls a bolt.
Which indicates Ben's going to follow it up, because you don't usually just bolt a Planeswalker out of nowhere. There's the recently departed Johnny Vengeant.
Indeed. So
-7 to destroy all lands target player controls.
Armageddon you. There you see Shahar's
Exile
hand.
just kind of languishing in his hand right now.
Though Shahar, if he has drawn a Snapcaster Mage, he actually has pretty close, like exactly lethal here, if all of his burn spells resolve. He doesn't have quite enough red mana to cast them all on the same turn, but the fact that he does have lethal means that Ben isn't necessarily going to predict that Shahar's hand is 4 bolts out of 5 cards. And Ben could tap himself into a position where Shahar's able to just rapid fire, bolt, bolt, Snapcaster, bolt, bolt.
How difficult is it, not specifically for these two players, but how difficult is it in a matchup like this where there are plenty of cards left in opposing hands to get a sense of what might be there? I mean, is this hand something that you can at least partly prepare for, partly predict?
You can think about it, because you know there are enough burn spells in both players' decks to end games, kind of out of nowhere. And here Ben's choosing to fight over the Electrolyze, partially because it actually cycles with a Cryptic command there. But for the most part, it's hard to tell when they have, like, say, Path to Exile, what they've presented with no targets. That could be a Lightning Bolt, because you don't necessarily want to cast that either until your opponent hits 0. So you could easily look at Shahar's hand of 5 cards and think it's, 3 bolts and 2 paths, or just 3 paths.
So here's Snapcaster Mage from Shahar, and as you can see, graveyards at the top of your screen, they're going to become potentially very important during this match. Ben is going to spell Snare, so that will counter the Snapcaster, and that means that as a result, Snapcaster doesn't happen, and means Cryptic Command does happen, and back we go to Shahar.
And at this point, Shahar is, since those Lightning Bolts, if they'd all combined to kill Ben, which it looked like he was close to assembling, that would have been the whole game. But when they don't combine to kill Ben, they actually don't do anything.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the trap with burn spells sometimes.
4.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's completely fine. Think twice.
Yeah, and Shadow of Doubt, one of the reasons it's so good in this matchup is that it cycles, which is all you want out of a card when you're trying to hit land drops. And it's another reason that Ben didn't crack his fetch lands ever into Shahar's blue mana. Getting your fetch land sniped by a Shadow of Doubt is a really devastating move.
Both of these players have Shadow of Doubt in their deck.
And this is can't search your libraries.
Yeah,
and you
players
draw a
cannot
card.
search libraries. I have seen players cast it and then end of their opponent's turn sack a fetch land, but that does not work.
End of your turn.
End of your turn, says Ben.
Shahar looks like he's got 2 Shadow of Doubts. Ben just has the 1.
So he's going to Tectonic Edge away Celestial Colonnade. And then on we go. He's drawn a land. You see a Sphinx's Revelation on the right there.
Do we estimate this is turn 18 or so?
Yeah, in the 15 to 18 range. Let's say, call it. Ben is ahead here, though. Make no mistake. He's behind on life totals, but if you look at Ben's hand, the fact that he's got 3 counter spells and a Snapcaster and a Revelation to Shahar's hand of basically lightning bolts, plus the nearly useless Path to Exile means that this is Ben's game to win.
End of your turn. I'm gonna go to 11.
So does Shahar now need Ben to make mistakes to win from here?
The biggest help for Shahar would be Ben maybe taking too much damage off his fetch line and dying to a flurry of bolts. I don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, Ben's 1 away right now, right?
He is
at
1
10.
away, but that 1 can be a million when you've got a cryptic command up.
Of course.
And
a Sphinx's Revelation.
yeah, the thing working most in Shahar's favor right now is that when your opponent in the control matchup has 5 cards in hand or 6 cards, I mean, look at Ben's hand. It's got 3 counterspells in it. He can't look at Shahar's hand of 5 cards and assume Shahar has 0 counterspells. Like, even though it would be great for Ben if he tapped out in Revelation for like 10, if he's not going to do that into an unknown hand of 5 cards and just get mana leaked. So he has to respect Shahar's hand, even though we know Shahar doesn't really have a whole lot going on. Ben getting potentially Colonnade activation or Revelation mana up. Sometimes it's interesting. You can tell by the way players sorting their lands what they're intending to cast, and then they don't cast it, and you kind of have gotten a little free information.
Right. I was talking to players about Ben Stark earlier. They were talking about when he first returned to the Pro Tour, how he would talk through his decision-making process out loud. He hadn't internalized it yet and was leaking information. He was just giving all this high-level analysis away to his opponent about what his opponent could do.
It was actually kind of unbearable when you were losing, because you'd be like, all right, I'll do this. I know that works. I do this. Okay, I'm still winning. I do this. And it's just like, yeah, you're winning. He'd be explaining to you how much he was winning by. Not in a malicious way at all, because that's not Ben, but just in a like, oh, these are the facts. Here you have them.
Here's the facts. You're losing.
All right, now for the first time on the Shahar side of the table.
Critter.
Yeah, an actual thing with Power and Toughness. Restoration Angel. Table's starting to look like the Return to Ravnica team seal that Ben put together for us on the stream yesterday.
And this could offer Shahar another way to win. If Ben lets that Angel hit him once, he's within triple bolt range, which Shahar is just waiting to see. Shahar may not go for it this turn, but I could definitely see him running a Restoration Angel in, just in the hope that Ben lets it hit him in fear of a Sphinx's Revelation.
So Ben is going to spend 5 mana and activate. You're going to sacrifice land, go fetch.
Ben getting attacked by Colonnade is actually very good for Shahar. He would rather Ben tap out for, to attack his life total, because Shahar has actually life points to burn. He's
Indeed.
way more worried about Ben resolving a Revelation, which Ben could actually do if he knew Shahar was sitting on an empty hand.
Yeah.
Shahar also notably short 1 cryptic command. He has 3 to Ben's 4. So he's only slightly behind, but he's slightly behind in all these metrics that matter.
Yeah.
And that, like I said, that adds up. I mean, when you're behind 1 or 2 cards in a bunch of different categories, and they're all very, very relevant.
So he just Tectonic edged the...
Ooh, that was one of Shahar's best draws, the 4th bolt.
Yep. Ben Stark would like to think twice. And now he's got 4 mana open. Which is it? And yes, says Shahar. And that's interesting because that looks like a lightning helix that's appeared.
Yeah, that's
for Ben.
That's not what Shahar wants to see.
Yeah, that's Shahar's worst draw.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll draw a 5th lightning bolt.
Maybe Ben will crack this fetch land. Ben has enough ammunition that he can still fight successfully here, but if he ends up tapping down for maybe a Sphinx Revelation and Shahar is able to quad bolt him in response, then we could have a game here.
And then he has a Restoration Angel back up to maybe finish the job too.
Yeah, I think he might actually get the fight started with Restoration Angel and then cast 4 lightning bolts in the same turn. It looks like Shahar has exactly 4 red lands. And he's relatively safe from Tectonic Edge. Again, you can't really afford to use those on non-colonnades. So as long as he keeps all those lands up, he's got death waiting in the wings for Ben if he can get an opportunity.
Interesting little byplay there. The judge asked why the graveyards were in 2 piles. Like, why are these in an exiled zone in the graveyard? He's like, look, we just sorted our graveyards into 2 piles, relevant and irrelevant. Meaning things that can be flashed back with Snapcaster Mage and things that cannot.
They want to see their opponent's graveyard library.
I guess that's better than discarding it.
Enough out of you. Activate Colonnade.
Enough out of you.
Again, a Colonnade activation is really what Shahar wants to see here.
Yeah, I mean, that's 5 entire land no longer available.
I think Shahar actually might be able to win this turn. If he goes end of turn Restoration Angel, that demands an answer, and then if Ben cracks a fetch, only 3 of these 4 bolts need to resolve.
Path to exile for your Celestial Colonnade. Ben's like, oh, okay, I'll go get a land. If I could find it. Nope.
Nope, straight up.
All gone.
He's got 5 basics, but they are all in play.
And Ben passes the turn.
Okay, will Shahar pull the trigger
This
on
is the turn where I
Angel
really
Winger?
like playing Restoration Angel. Ben's not going to get much more tapped down than this.
So, is this the moment where that extraordinary hand you see on your screen of 4 lightning bolts and a Restoration Angel punishes the tapping of those 5 lands for a Celestial Colonnade? Well, Shahar did not pull the trigger.
I really think that was his best shot. I think Ben was tapped down low enough that he might have been able to force through lethal.
We've talked a little bit about Shahar playing very conservatively.
And it looks like that's what he's doing here. Of course, Ben cracking that fetch could also let Shahar win right now. If Shahar goes for the quad bolt, Ben can only basically stop one of them with Lightning Helix or Cryptic Command.
Oh. Shahar says, no, wait, we're not quite through the end of my turn yet.
So it looks like Shahar's going to bolt Ben. Shahar's going to bolt Ben. When Shahar goes for the lethal bolt, Ben's going to Helix. Then Shahar's going to have the 4th bolt to trump that. So I think Ben cracking that fetch going from 10 to 9 is what let Shahar into this game, which he would otherwise be fairly locked out of.
Okay, down to 6.
Down to 6. Lightning bolt you.
Ben is not going to be pleased after this game.
Is Ben ever pleased after a game he loses?
He's actually very good about, when he loses and there's nothing he could do, he doesn't mind, but he really doesn't like when he could have taken a different line perhaps, and this game had a lot of options.
And there's the Lightning Helix. Ben's at 3.
Response, lightning bolt you.
I was thinking 3, but I wasn't thinking.
I was thinking 3, but I wasn't thinking 4.
It's a good way to steal it, I think.
I think so.
And as Ben actually just stole the game, or Shahar just stole the game, as Ben said.
Good game.
Good game! Oh, and there's huge applause. I mean, these two have drawn a ton of a crowd to watch this one. And how's about that then, boys and girls? Shahar Shenhar leads Ben Stark by 1-0.
Yeah, the cracking of those fetch lands was a win condition, as it turns out.
Somewhere around turn 25.
Yeah, it took a while.
It didn't take long, actually. It took a lot of turns, but that actually went quicker than some aggro matchups we watched this weekend.
And it's so interesting to see, again, you look at Magic, we talked a BDM at the desk earlier this morning about that match we'd seen with creature on one side, and then on the other side, one creature with a bunch of enchantments on, and somehow that was fair Magic. And here again, you see a completely different sense of the team that delivers the weapons with which you fight. And there was a wonderful overhead shot of Ben with his 6 tapped land, no longer available, and the 5 sort of spread out going, or 5 or 6, up against this rake of Shahar's land, and ultimately, Well, that was the window, and Shahar, just from hand, bolt you, bolt you, bolt you, response bolt you. Good game.
That was a lot of lightning bolts in a very short time frame.
Yeah.
Why don't we see if we can take a look at the sideboards for these two. There's plenty going on with this. Stark on the left, Shahar on the right as you look. And there's certainly, as usual, plenty of options around. And Ben Stark's actually got a very big sideboard. There you see 2 Hallowed Burial, 2 Wear and Tear. There's 2 Counterflux, and then 1 Dispel, 1 Shadow of Doubt, an Aven Mind Sensor, Baneslayer Angel, Teferi Major Zalfir, Threads of Disloyalty, Sowing Salt, Pyroclasm, and Tectonic Edge. So, 15 cards to choose from, and lots of different options. Where do we go, though?
Well, certainly the 2 Counterflux, the Dispel, the Teferi, and the Tectonic Edge are coming in. I don't think that's even close to a question. Those 5 cards are all excellent in this matchup. Teferi locks your opponent out from playing spells. The others are counterspells, some of which are uncounterable. And then Tectonic Edge is one of the most important cards you can have in your 75.
Right, like we said, both as an additional land and as a way to combat the Celestial Colonnades.
So the rest gets a little shakier. You're not going to bring in the Hallowed Burials, the Wear and Tears, the Pyroclasm. And I don't, or the Threads of Disloyalty. I don't think you bring in Aven Mind Sensor because it dies to a Lightning Helix or Electrolyze especially.
Yeah.
And Electrolyze isn't going anywhere, so Mind Sensor doesn't sound like an appealing option.
Right, you don't see yourself bringing it into just like you said, snipe a fetch land.
I think if you want that, you should just bring in the second Shadow of Doubt, have the 2 shadows. I think you can't really afford to give your opponent a free card off Electrolyze that often. Baneslayer Angel is an interesting one because you can steal games with it. It's not generally good against the main deck configuration because it just gives them a target for path. But your opponent wants to, Shahar here wants to take out paths.
Yeah.
So if he takes out all his paths, you could maybe sneak in a Baneslayer. The only problem is it, again, costs 5 as a sorcery, so it gets Mana Leaked or Cryptic commanded.
Yeah.
And then lastly, there's Sowing Salt, which I don't think quite makes the cut. It is cute to do it on Celestial Colonnade, but I think, again, a 4-mana sorcery is really not what you can afford most of the time.
Or if you could somehow get a tapped Tectonic Edge.
Right, that would be good too. I mean, I could see you having enough dead cards to take out that, but I think you do end up wanting to keep in some number of Lightning Helixes just to stop basically what just happened.
Right.
So that's Ben Stark and all his options to look at. And then on the other side of the table, you have the 19-year-old Israeli national champion, Shahar Shenhar. And there you see him, and he is busy sideboarding away. Similarly, plenty to choose from in his list. And there are some very interesting cards there too. We'll take a look for those in a moment as we gear up for Game 2. There you see it, 3 Molten Rain, a Vendilion Click, Thundermaw Hellkite, there's 2 of those, couple of Pyroclasms, 2 Supreme Verdict, which gets around all the counters, of course, Counter Flux, Celestial Purge, 1 Dispel, and an Engineered Explosives as well. So once again, where do you think we go, guys?
Well, I think you start with Vendilion Click, Counterflux, and Dispel. Not a huge surprise. These are the same kind of cards that Ben had that you would definitely want in. Past that, actually, again, this is something, if they tested and thought that the Molten Rain Thundermaw Hellkite plan was good, I would believe them. But I don't know what you think, BDM, but Molten Rain seems a little ambitious here.
Molten Rain seems like you probably don't want to, tap out at that early point in the game there. But I could see a Thundermaw Hellkite the same way you talked about a Baneslayer Angel. If you think some of the cards are going to be gone, even if it gets, bounced to your hand with a Cryptic command, you can play it again later. It comes in, it's hasty.
Yeah, it does enough damage right away that I might like it a little more than Baneslayer.
Yeah.
Again, it comes down to mostly how many cards you want to take out, and it looks like Shahar, he's got the Path to Exiles that he wants to take out and some number of the bolts, despite their excellent work there.
Well, I was going to ask you whether they go away despite... So thanks very much, you've won the game, and you're out.
I mean, that is kind of what happens, and with the 4 cards he wants to take out, you're taking out the 3 paths and maybe something else. I could see maybe leaving some number of path in for Celestial Colonnade, but I think given that you have Tectonic Edges to answer those, I don't really like it out of Shahar's list. Ben has a little more of an argument because Shahar does have Restoration Angels, but overall, these players probably don't want the really expensive spells. They don't want that much creature removal.
So let's rock and roll. It's time for Game 2, and we get down to the action, which will feature some lands. There we are, a couple of land for Stark, second land coming down for Shahar.
Do you ever see a situation where this match goes, play my second land, play a Snapcaster Mage, start attacking you?
I've seen that happen in Control Mirrors before, but because it's so effective to Snapcaster a Lightning Helix or a Bolt here, I think that you're probably not going to want to do that, especially since that just gives them Electrolyze targets. It looks like Ben also kept one of his paths in, or at least one of his paths in, again, to maybe fight Shahar's Restoration Angels and potentially Thunder Maws if he thinks Shahar's bringing those in, as well as the ever-present Celestial Colonnades.
Yeah, they're never going to be dead with the Colonnades.
Yeah, they're never going to be absolutely dead, but you do have, Ben, if you're Ben especially, 4 Tectonic Edge to deal with 4 Colonnade.
Are there ever occasions where you path your own guy because you want the land?
That happens, but there aren't very many guys in their decks that they can actually target with Path.
Sure.
But that is certainly a play.
Snapcaster my path back.
So here's a cool play. Shahar, Tectonic Edge is Ben's Tectonic Edge. The reason he can't get Tech Edge back is that puts him to 3 land. Ben's not able to activate the Tectonic Edge against Shahar.
Very neat.
And that comes up actually a lot in Tectonic Edge mirrors.
Ben had a little moment there while he was thinking about whether he wanted to crack that.
Shahar potentially deciding whether he wants to crack in response while Shadow of Doubt is uncastable, or maybe even just represent Shadow of Doubt.
It's certainly a card Ben was wary of. He thought for a moment, a beat before sacrificing that fetch land.
Yeah, I mean, again, getting hit by Shadow of Doubt is pretty hard to recover from in the first couple turns.
Luis, you said that Ben, when he watches the tape back of Game 1, will not be best pleased. But will he be feeling that already? Is it apparent from the gameplay for themselves in Game 1 that he should not be pleased? Or is it only because of the information that we have?
No, I think if Ben looks back on that, he'll realize that cracking the land to go from 10 to 9 was just an unnecessary risk. He was thinning his deck, he was getting another land into play, but you're at the point in the game where your hand is so good, you're not losing to that many cards.
Right.
Well, and also he put Shahar on 75% of his hand.
Right, and
He said, "I think you have 3 lightning bolts."
And he you know, he was right. But he was wrong about the 4th. And the problem there is that if Shahar's hand is 4 bolts, you lose that game. And if his hand is 4 bolts, you also win the game very easily otherwise, because the 4-bolt hand doesn't actually beat the Revelation Cryptic Command hand, assuming Ben has the time to cast those
So
spells.
you're saying you need to take your reasoning one step further. You're like, I think he has 3 lightning bolts. That you have to ask yourself the question:
What if
he
it's
has
4?
4?
Yeah.
What happens?
I mean, it was a very low percentage play, and Shahar was in fact immune to Lightning Helix, but again, Ben has to look, how do I lose this game? You have to look at your paths to defeat, and one of them was Shahar having the 4th bolt. As low of a probability as that was, you don't really lose much by playing around it.
I will bounce Colonnade and draw.
I will bounce Colonnade and draw, announces Ben Stark.
1-2 and shock myself, and he took 1, 2, and 2 from Electrolyze.
A fairly common use of Cryptic Command here is to just bounce your opponent's land, draw a card. That can often make them discard if they have 7 cards in hand. It just puts you a little ahead on the land count.
Yeah, but you just said
And
we're both at 17.
Ben,
You just agreed.
if he's short on lands here, then he really does want to cycle and try to find more lands.
Bouncing
Right.
Colonnade.
Even if the game goes long and they both end up with a lot of lands in play, that little interaction can be valuable.
It can, and sometimes if you're ahead, a step or 2 on lands, especially if you're on the play and you do that, you can end up in a turn where you can just play a threat and a counter, and your opponent can only play 1 counter. Shahar deciding whether he wants to fight over this or not, which he is perfectly capable of. He's got a number of cards in his hand, and Mana Leak is the one, or Counterflux is the one what he could use. You wouldn't really want to use a Counterflux here. That's a card's best served late.
You already talked about the idea that the mana leaks just get worse and worse as the game progresses.
I like the aggressive tech packaging here with Shahar. And once you start doing that, you should probably keep doing that. You don't really want to back off, because then you just traded a tech edge for a Steam Vents, which going long isn't really good. But if you do it enough early here, especially if you sense Ben might be low on lands, you can get an advantage. Of course, if the game does go long and Shahar has done this, he's going to end up down just 1 tech edge, because tech edge for tech edge is a fair trade. But tech edge for Steam Vents can put you at a disadvantage going into the late game.
Yep.
You see Shahar's hand on the right. That Restoration Angel ready to go. Everything else spells.
As they both used Portal Basic lands. I'm sure they're Shahar's. Ben rarely cares what picture of card he uses, which is a huge shock to the viewers, I'm sure.
looked for a long time as if Shahar might be back here again today in the top 8 of the team event, the Magic World Cup. But in the end, they were eliminated in the top 16. Some terrific teams in there, including Chile, Greece were in there, had a couple of heartbreaking last round losses. But Shahar comes back as an individual with his 3 Grand Prix titles as he casts Electrolyze, draws the card, draws into Mana Leak, and then untaps.
Ben almost also played in another event this weekend. He came very close to playing in the Flavor Draft Championship with Luis here, but it didn't quite work out.
There's an open invitation for Ben to Flavor Draft, but he gracefully declined. He said he had to prepare for the top 4, otherwise he would have.
And by prepare for the top 4, you mean draft online?
Right. Once he learned what a multiverse was, he was very interested in flavor drafting.
Right. By prepare for it, I mean not Flavor Draft.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in my backpack. The sleeves. They took my.
Someone needs to get down there and give Shahar some stronghold mana leaks, though. These 8th edition mana leaks are killing me.
You're right. That's right.
Oh. Was Mana Leak good in Stronghold? Or was it just so blisteringly fast you never got around? I can't really remember what it was like back then.
The draft environment? Or
yeah.
It was okay. You would generally play it because the first 5 turns it's good. It did get dead later, but with buyback spells, you actually had opportunity to randomly get a capsize or something.
Yeah.
Backpack if this happens again.
Ooh,
A fan
capsize with buyback.
Yeah.
I don't know where we are.
I was doing a turn. I electrolyzed. I drew a card, and they stopped me.
Okay. I mean, I believe you.
This is true.
So Shahar
Ew.
I
electrolyzed.
believe you. I don't personally have any clue.
He electrolyzed and drew the mana leak. I don't know what happened after that.
So I think the discussion seems to be about where they are within the turn cycle.
Right.
Because Shahar went
You haven't missed
electrolyze,
So you
resolve,
successfully correct.
draw
So
a
it's
card,
you've
and then
played 7 turns.
untapped and looked to draw a card, and then they're like, wait. Are we actually in someone's turn
And
here?
it's a 7th turn.
Yeah, but I have not untapped from 8th.
He is not untapped for his 8th turn, says Shahar. Hope you can hear
I mean, I know my hand. I
what
know
they're
I drew
going there.
this. I mean, I'll have to electrolyze.
They might need to do a card count here if they're not sure, just to be safe, but it looks like they have a reasonably high confidence, and Shahar's goes to his turn.
And this confusion was precipitated by a broken sleeve.
Right.
That's what it looked like, yeah.
Yeah.
You have 6 cards?
6 cards in hand for Shahar Shenhar.
6 pretty good cards.
5 counter spells and a Restoration Angel, essentially, with the Snapcaster doubling up.
There's no way he's going to get bolted 4 times.
Yeah, but there's no way Ben is either.
Yeah, Ben, if you're looking at Ben, he does have the Baneslayer in, it looks like, as well as a bunch of counters, a Sphinx of Revelation, and a Path to Exile, which this is an advantage for Shahar. Ben is a little more incentivized to leave Path in to stop Restoration Angel Vendilion click. I mean, he'd rather electrolyze the click, but the Restoration Angel is hard to kill, and having to leave Path in your deck is not something you really like in the control matchups.
I don't know if we have audio. I don't think they can hear us. Can they? Oh, there's a mic right there.
Ben speculating on whether we can hear him.
Just bring it. I mean,
For once, it wasn't me who cursed.
thank you. There you go.
Small mercies.
When you're teaching beginner players about control mirrors, one of the first things you say is, by and large, respond, don't be super proactive, because if you tap 5 for the first big threat, well, that's 5 mana you don't have for your 2 counter spells you need, and even if you force it through, then the other player gets a whole turn to do whatever it is they want. How do you start teaching people when it is the time to be proactive? Because that's much tougher to do.
It is. The main time to be proactive, again, because you don't really want to, is when you're at a disadvantage for some other reason. One is like, in this case, where Ben is actually starting to miss land drops. That puts him in a really bad spot. The other is if your opponent has something out or your hand is bad and you feel like you're not going to win the game going long. You just have to try to force an end to it. So in this spot, Ben is kind of, goaded into playing spells by the fact that he's not drawing lands and he doesn't want to just discard, because that's even worse. Looks like he's leading with his Snapcaster Mage to try to elicit a response here from Shahar.
Is Shahar going to try to punish him here with that tech edge? I mean,
He-
you talked about like keeping up that pressure.
He very well might. I think Ben is, has been on 5 land for a couple turns now. Shahar is 6 in play here, 7 in play here, so it would be to his advantage. He does want to make sure that he doesn't accidentally let Ben resolve a Gideon or something along those lines. He doesn't know Ben has Baneslayer, but that is a card he should be aware of.
presumably it's quite difficult to play around a card that you know they only have one of as a possibility, because the overwhelming majority of the time it isn't in their hand.
Yeah, and it's like if they saw the deck list, let's say they know they had one Mana Tithe floating around, then
Yeah.
it would be heartbreaking to get Mana Tithe, but you just can't consistently play around it, or they're getting way more value out of it than just by having it.
Sure.
Shahar getting a small advantage here. If he's going to electrolyze the Ben Snapcaster with his own, then he, again, picks up a little bit of an edge.
Snapcaster, electrolyze, 1/1.
Taking the opportunity while Ben's tapped out.
He chooses not to use the tech edge there.
Yeah, he doesn't. He's got a Mana Lake. He wants to potentially Mana Lake a 5 casting cost spell.
And here it comes.
Ben leaving up a basic because of Tectonic Edge.
Baneslayer Angel. And Shahar says about that, well, sacrifice the land first of all.
About that, I would like you to show me a spell snare. Ben is going to oblige.
Ben has it at the ready.
Baneslayer looks like it's going to be decent here. Shahar doesn't have an immediate answer. He can always bounce it with Cryptic and then counterflux it, but that's not the easiest course of action, especially since he actually has a Tectonic Edge and a plane, so it looks like he has slightly too much colorless mana to cast the blue, 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 red colorless sequence of plays.
And there is the spell snare.
Yeah, leak into spell snare. Ooh,
Oh, he did bring in the Thunderball Hellcates.
time for some dragons.
Stark at 9. Let's just remind ourselves of the life total here, because we've had it on the screen, of course, but we tend to think of it as not super relevant, but it's getting relevant now, because there's that Baneslayer. Shahar now in the business part of Game 2, 1-0 up, and Stark continuing to just take little sips of water, stay hydrated under the lights. Good plan. And he's tapped out, so he doesn't need to represent anything other than a desire to stay hydrated.
It is kind of comforting to be tapped out. Shahar looking like a standard deck with a bunch of Hellkites and a Restoration Angel.
When you are tapped out like that, Luis, in what is a very brain-intensive match, do you actively disengage brain for a moment or two? Do you go, yep, I'm tapped out now, off you go, and you just like distance yourself from the match a little, or not really?
I don't really take myself out of the match, but yeah, I don't always think about anything in particular. And Shahar did draw Scalding Tarn off the Cryptic that bounced the Angel, which does give him access now to Counterflux, which is going to be very impactful here. If Ben goes for the Angel plus Mana Leak, Counterflux will stop that.
Full 7 cards in hand for Stark right now. There you see Counterflux, part of the cycle of can't be countered, so you've got Supreme Verdict in that lot, amongst others. Counter target spell you do not control. You can overload it to counter lots of spells.
Have you ever overloaded one?
I have like once. We got in a counter war, and it didn't change the outcome because I had the last counter anyway, but it's a good insurance policy because
Sure.
you then know they can't do anything when it's countering 3 of their spells.
Sorry, it's been a while since I played against Thundermaw Hellkite. It's tap all flying creatures and then they each take 1 when it comes into play. Bigger opponent's control.
Ben just checking what Thundermaw Hellkite does, and he is entirely correct. 5/5 fly,
Deals 1 damage and tap all.
1 damage to all of
Taps all
flies,
flying
and
creatures
taps them all.
So Shahar can just let a
Deals 1 damage to
Baneslayer
each
Angel
flying creature
resolve.
and then taps it.
Yes.
If Ben is at
That might
low
be
enough
the
life
low-
He's
total,
at
which he
7.
is,
They are tapping
Shahar
to
could
get
just
the
let
damage.
Baneslayer resolve and go for the kill.
Just thinking.
And Johar with 8 lands, he has enough to play Thundermaw with backup, with Counterflux backup.
Right. He's also pretty happy if Ben doesn't play it here. Or
Yeah.
reasonably happy.
If Ben doesn't play anything here, Shahar is probably just dropping a Restoration Angel. He's able to pressure Ben's life total very hard here.
There it is.
This best 3 out of 5, it's very much a kind of tennis equivalent to a Grand Slam 3 sets out of 5.
Exact.
If you're 2-0 down in
Yeah.
a control mirror,
Look at Shahar reading the text of Thundermaw Hellkite as well.
Yeah.
He's like, well, if we're going to look at what a Thundermaw Hellkite does, can I see as well?
Yeah.
curious what my opponent might be playing around.
Depending on how much he sold that is not a great move against Ben, because Ben is very good at reading people.
Ben.
So I was just asking whether you do feel if you're 2-0 down in a big control mirror rather than if you're playing, let's say, Nia Blitz, it seems a lot further away. You know that you're going to have to sit here against someone as good as Shahar Shenhar for, let's say, an hour and a half to come back and beat him 3-2.
Yeah, it is more mentally taxing. I mean, you just have to steel yourself and get on with it, because that is your only way to win the tournament. But when you're in that position, you are aware that you're there for the long haul.
So it looks like Shahar is going to try to put some pressure on here with the Restoration Angel.
I think that's his best move. Shahar's got a lot of spells in hand, and he doesn't. He has eight lands, but at this point, pressuring Ben is a very good idea, especially since Ben is behind on life totals.
I definitely got to do some thinking now. How many cards you got left in the grip?
In the grip?
Yeah.
4.
See William Jensen on Twitter saying that there is a 0% chance that Ben does not know Shenhar has Thundermore Hellkite right now.
Yeah, after that whole
acting job, yeah.
gimmick, yeah.
Question becomes whether or not he has the tools to do anything about
Yeah,
it.
he might not be able to necessarily beat it, especially since Shahar has a number of other very relevant cards. But that is something you might want to reserve for when you're playing against, say, not Ben Stark.
You can go back. No, I'm cryptic. I have to decide if I'm going to draw a card or bounce or Colonnade.
Ben also under pressure from a Colonnade. He's deciding whether he wants to bounce it, because if he doesn't, there's a chance Shahar wants to just send it in.
I decided it was right to cryptic and then just put it out without thinking about the second ability.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So this should be game for Shahar here.
Let's see.
Ben has 3 up. Ben does have Mana Leak plus Path to Exile. So it looks like Ben is going to be able to potentially Mana Leak the Hellkite, have Shahar pay, and then pass it.
Or unless Shahar uses Spell Snare.
But then Shahar's just drawn a Spell Snare, so it looks like Shahar has all the tools he needs. Even if he didn't have the Spell Snare, Ben might let the Thundermaw resolve, trying to Mana Leak Shahar's counter, and end up getting counterfluxed.
So, Thundermaw Hellkite,
So yeah,
smash.
Ben actually is just losing to counterflux here, even if he has the Mana Leak.
Path to Exile, Counterflux.
Good game.
Good game. And 2-0 to Shahar Shenhar. BDM, I wanted to talk to you a little bit. As we've seen, you and I were looking at the average age of the 16 players in the championship here at the World Championships. And Magic players, we see a sort of this field of 16. We've got a bunch in their mid-20s, a lot of late 20s, go up to Willie Adel at 34. Shahar's the youngest of our 16 at 19. And we talk about him still being a teenager. It's incredible poise that he's shown here.
Absolutely. I've had a chance to see a lot of teenage players throughout my time in Magic, and a lot of those players were teenagers at a time where they didn't have the same sort of adult role models in the game that Shahar has had to work with.
Just going to show you this Thundermaw Hellkite that we've been talking about here in Game 2. Mythic Rare, of course, from M 2013. Aggressive red decks, apparently, use it as a 5/5 finisher. Do you know what else does? Blue, white, red control decks.
It seems like there's been some confusion. It actually does tap Baneslayer, even though Baneslayer has protection from it, because it just taps all your opponent's flyers and deals damage to them.
Right.
They're not
Yeah.
they're not linked.
Those creatures are tapped. Yeah, tap those creatures.
Right, it's tap all creatures.
Yeah.
Your opponent controls. Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at that Thundermaw Hellkite. Once again, we'll give you the full art treatment on that
It does
one.
have haste. It's a little quick.
Yeah, it was. It was there momentarily, and we'll get that up again. Thundermaw Hellkite, just such a terrific card. As you say, aggressive red decks use this 5/5 dragon with haste, as a finisher. That is an awful lot of Grand Prix top 8 deck lists. Goodness me.
Yeah, it took a little while for it to find its like foothold in Constructed, but it's pretty firmly remained there ever since.
A fairly obvious question, Luis, but a lot of people won't know the answer. It says there, recently entered the spotlight after being a sleeper card for several months, i.e. a card that sits there, doesn't get a lot of press, doesn't get a lot of play. You said that you felt that Lifebane Zombie in M14 was kind of a card that had been a little bit undervalued. What should people be looking for when they're searching for sleepers to try and get ahead of the curve?
I just want to add, Lifebane Zombie was more of a napper.
Yeah, it didn't sleep for very long.
Okay.
But I think in general, one of the things you have to look at is, well, powerful cards. I mean, both these cards fit the bill. They're a little, Lifebane Zombie is a little more targeted. The other is doing something that no other card's really doing. And Lifebane Zombie actually answering Thragtusk is, I think, one of the qualities that makes it good. And similarly, Thundermaw Hellkite answers Lingering Souls very well.
Right, so you're looking for something that does a very specific job rather than just being, it's a good creature, it's a decent counterspell. It's like, and it changes the format in this subtle way. Fair enough. Thundermaw Hellkite there. And that Thundermaw Hellkite has given Shahar Shenhar a 2-0 lead. And now it is a long way back for Ben Stark. He is elected for the Magic Pro Tour Hall of Fame. Later this year, we'll see him inducted at Pro Tour Theros in Dublin. Hope you're going to join us for that later in the year. But it's a long road back for Ben Stark.
Yeah, it's certainly doable. I think being down 0-2 does not mean you're out.
Has he been unlucky in the sense that the quad bolt, I know you said you could see something about that, but it's relatively rare to see a hand like that.
But in game one, both players, had lots of land, had access to cast all their spells, and Ben made a decision. I don't think that he got unlucky. I think he made a decision.
Yeah,
and Shahar capitalized on it. I think they played a game of Magic. Decisions were made, and Shahar came out on top.
I certainly would not say that Ben got unlucky game one, and Ben wouldn't either. I mean, Magic players like talking about themselves being unlucky, but Ben would not claim he was unlucky there.
I need to ask you, Luis, 2008 Pro Tour Berlin, you're in the top 8. It really is for an awful lot of marbles. And you face this. You were 2-0 down. How do you pretend that you're not 2-0 down? Because I'm pretty sure that's the way to do it. You have to think that you're not 2-0 down.
Well, yeah, you certainly don't want to change the way you played, unless the way you played wasn't good up until then. But for the most part, you really do have to kind of set it aside. The time to wonder and the time to worry is just after the tournament. You can then, then bask in the fact that you've still done well enough to get to a best-of-5 match, which always means good things. But, I mean, it is tough. I mean, being able to kind of like put yourself in a mental isolation chamber, even when you're facing elimination in a best-of-5 match, is something I think you need in order to succeed.
Thought for the day. 2 of these games have gone. With a maximum of 3 to go, number of Sphinx's revelations cast or resolved, 0.
That is impressive. That was not something I would have expected.
Well, it almost seems like both players are just scared to have a chance. Scared of the opportunity cost of casting a Sphinx's revelation.
This matchup also looks very different in best-of-5s than it does in a normal timed 2 out of 3 round.
Why?
Because game 1 is going to dominate the post board. Both decks are a lot tighter. They don't have as many dead cards. They have a lot more threats. Game 1 is the kind of loose game where both players have more removal than the opposing player has threats, and is more likely to end with 20 lands in play on each side. We saw Yuya get naturally decked by Shuhai in the World Championship, and in a best-of-5 match. First of all, there's no time limit, so you don't have to worry about that. Second of all, the first game is only a smaller part than the post-sideboard game.
Sure.
So you could see in a normal best 2 out of 3 match, game 1 take 40 minutes, end up with someone decking, and then you don't really get to see the post-board like counterplay. Whereas here, we're going to see all the post-board games in their glory.
People are asking about the Baneslayer Angel
Interaction
with Thundermaw Hellkite a little more. Saying that since it feels like it's predicated on the creature taking the damage.
Yeah, well, I've gotten this straight from Sheldon, so I'm going to go ahead and run with it. But the fact that it doesn't damage those creatures, when it says "and those creatures," it just means all your creatures your opponents control, not all damaged creatures, is what I would say when looking at the card.
Right. And just for a moment, Mike Gleason deserves a little shout out for this. He said, I overloaded a counterflux in Commander once, countered 8 spells total. I don't know if I ever felt better about a resolved spell. LOL.
Let's rock and roll with Game 3, and now Ben Stark is 20 life points away, which could be a long way away, from elimination here in the semifinals of the World Championships 2013, because Shahar Shenhar leads 2-0.
I'll give you a take back.
Your turn.
I'll give you a take back, said Shahar, generously up 2 games to none.
Says 19-year-old Shahar Shenhar to Hall of Famer elect Ben Stark. No, if you want to correct your misplay, that's fine.
So it's interesting. Shahar does have a Molten Rain in his hand, which definitely means he tested the matchup. That's not something I think you would do without testing the matchup. But the fact that he thinks that Molten Rain is good enough to bring it in this matchup is interesting. I'd be curious to see how those testing games have gone.
Right, and they've had several days to test.
Yeah,
and they've known that this was the matchup coming.
I mean, they ended play on Thursday and then have had it up until Sunday.
Now, there you see Molten Rain. Louise, is it possible, because my experience is that top pros are generally not gamblers at heart, is it possible that Shahar's gone, I'm 2-0 up, and there is this plan that involves, hey, what if I get a free win here with Molten Rains and just actually completely stymieing the opponent? Is that something you would consider in a kind of 2-0 situation?
No, again, the game score really shouldn't matter in terms of your sideboarding plans. I think Shahar, if he's bringing them in, he's determined they're good. It might be, depending on whether he's on the play or the draw, but if you're bringing them in on the draw, I can't imagine you don't want them on the play. And it did draw a mana leak, so that is certainly better than a lot of cards in his deck would have done.
So think twice from Ben. He untaps, draws into another mana leak.
And this is a solid hand to start with. Drawing both your Think Twices in a couple counter spells is kind of where you want to be. This is what didn't happen last game as he started missing land drops around turn 5 or 6. And that, along with some aggressive tech edging, put him in a position where he got behind and couldn't really answer all of Shahar's threats.
You know their format is good when you're playing size as you play Think Twice.
2 of them. I was fine with the first.
It's a good card to draw in the matchup.
Yeah.
Think Twice always reminds me of Jerry Thompson because he always wants to play 4. I always try to shave it to 3 or 2. He always yells at me. I try to cut a land.
Two very different games we've had so far.
Vendilion Click Restoration Angel could be pretty impactful here.
Yeah, and that is one of the synergies the deck has. It is tough to get a Vendilion Click to survive against a landmine field full of electrolyzes, but every now and then it will happen.
Can confirm that they do like Molten Rain. Shahar Shenhar and Tom Martell were testing partners for this tournament, as we see Vendilion Click run out. And Tom Martell apparently saying, yeah, we really like the Molten Rain in the matchup. Ben is going to send Electrolyze at the Vendilion Click.
And this is an interaction that Vendilion Click, as amazing as it is in Control Mirrors, it does open Shahar's deck up to getting electrolyzed for, even though he's getting to degrade Ben's hand quality by taking a spell and replacing it with a random draw, still getting electrolyzed in a 2-for-1 is not really what you want.
And also, it's potentially degrade his hand. I mean, there's not a lot that Ben can draw in place of one of these that he wouldn't want just perfectly fine, is there? I mean,
no. It's more like the expected value of his hand does go down. You take a card that's like an 8, and the average card in his deck, average,
sure.
If you count all the lands and all that.
And we're dealing with small margins, as we've been saying all along.
Right, so
down to Mana Leak and Spell Snare plus 2 land, and Ben will replace with what turned out to be Counterflux.
Well, there you go. you were proven correct in that.
Yay! Upgrade! So, Shenhar cracks, and they're busy sort of confirming that each is happy with the cracked lands because there are these shadows of doubt on both sides, which mean you can't search libraries. Players can't search libraries, draw a card.
And while it may not be evident because these players are both playing at a very fast clip, there are a lot of priority passes here that are impactful, as we saw Shahar won game 1 by the quad bolt when Ben was tapped out after fetching in Shahar's end step. So there's all these stops when you might want to do something. Like, for example, Ben may want to do something while Shahar's tapped out here. He probably won't, looking at his hand, but this is the sort of thing where Shahar can't just assume he's untapping. Ben does have an opportunity to play something.
Yeah, it's the parts of the turn cycle that a lot of matches don't reach.
They use everything but the squeal here in the control mirror.
Yeah.
It's your turn.
So it's your turn, says Ben, and all that mana untaps for Shahar. He's drawn a path to exile.
So seeing the Baneslayer may have prompted him to bring back in the path. Otherwise, I don't think you would want it. You generally are not looking to path and Molten Rain the same opponent under normal circumstances.
Sure.
So this is not, the normal circumstances. Control mirrors are a very strange animal.
Is part of the reason that people sometimes struggle with them the fact that just by their nature, if I want to play a 10-game set of Naya Blitz against some Gruul aggro deck, we can get through that maybe in an hour and a couple of hours, and we could play 3 games of this in the same time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playtesting, I'd imagine that even the control mirrors would be a little faster.
Yes.
But they do take longer. I mean, that is just absolutely true. There's no way you could say they take less time.
Yeah.
And I think that not everyone has the stamina or desire to put themselves through that.
They don't? They don't have the desire?
Surprising, I know, but I've heard rumors.
As we sit here in our island pins right the way across the booth. So, 1917, not a lot of damage here in this one so far. As Shahar will say, I'm going to have another go at a Vendilion Click.
Which did get protected by the first one. The first one, it bit the bullet, it took the electrolyze, then it put the second electrolyze on the bottom of the library. So this one is fairly safe and will actually give Shahar a decent edge.
Mm-hmm. Stark must win this to stay alive.
I am okay with that. Who would you like to target?
After these two, the small matter of the Magic Online champion winner Reed Duke up against your player of the year, Josh Layden, in a matchup that features, well, Bant, Hexproof, but without one of the colours, and Jund, but without one of the colours. Reed, of course, one of our at-large bids. 2011, he was the Magic Online champion, because, of course, this time around it was Dmitry Budikov of the Russian Federation.
Well, he's still a Magic Online champion. You don't stop being a Pro
Not
Tour
the reigning
champion.
one, though. Yes, Josh is the
At
only
least I
one.
hope you don't.
Yeah. Josh is the only one who gets to claim to be reigning something in the second semi-final. And that Jundish, Hexproof-ish deck, that's going to be a really fun matchup later on this afternoon before we get to the World Championship final itself.
I would be willing to guess that either player in this matchup will have more lands than both players combined in any given game.
Yes, I can see that.
I'll take one.
Take one, says Ben, as he cracks. And just checking that's all right. It is. Remember, Ben ran out of his 5 basic lands in game 1
I'll take one.
of this best of 5 set.
Dissolver.
Double Restoration Angel. And then counter, kill it if I can't counter it.
And Shahar in good shape here because the Vendilion Click's resolved and is starting to attack, which means that if Ben does have to remove it, which he eventually will, Shahar can then go for the Angel and then possibly the second Angel.
Think twice. Yes.
And notice that Ben did crack his fetch lands before using Think Twice, indicating that he's interested in drawing action, not land. Also, it shuffles the Electrolyze that was on the bottom of his library back into the general populace, which and it is a card he would like to draw if possible.
How many cards do you have?
Another counter spell goes into hand. That looked like another spell snare.
Yeah, so both Ben and Shahar are on Spell Snares and Mana Leaks only, which aren't what we call hard counters. They can't counter everything. They have to meet a specific circumstance. Looks like we might see a fight over Ben's Baneslayer here soon, but Path to Exile does beat Mana Leak usually since Path is so cheap to cast.
Will Shahar let it resolve, do you believe?
I think that...
Or is he willing to try to bait something out with a Mana Leak first?
So Ben is going to tap down to not a ton of lands. Shahar might just Mana Leak it just to get Ben to crack some fetch lands. But You know, Shahar is happy with trading Path to Exile for a Baneslayer here, so I wouldn't be surprised if he just let it resolve and path it into turn. He has shown a willingness to fight with Mana Leak, even when it was non-lethal, as it were.
Well, it looks like he's actually got a decision to make as far as he's concerned.
Oh, it certainly is a real decision. It's just how he wants this game to progress. If he wants to trade a Mana Leak for a point of damage off the fetch land, tapping Ben out so he can kind of guaranteed resolve Restoration Angel. Also, by Restoration Angeling in response, he might get a look at Ben's hand with Vendilion Click, which would also show him how to proceed.
That looks like what he's going to do. Here comes
Could
Restoration
also
Angel.
push a card in his hand if he wants.
He could. But Shahar's hand, I think, is fairly relevant right now. The Mana Leak is the worst card in Shahar's hand, but it actually might work in a second here anyway. So I think here there are enough important things going on that you actually just want to, at the very least, take a look at Ben's hand, even if he doesn't end up actually taking anything.
I guess that's fine from Ben Stark. So when Vendilion Click disappears and reappears, Shahar will get to see those 5 cards.
I think Shahar can feel the finals in hand here, since the game isn't over yet. There's still a lot of draw steps, but Shahar is ahead here.
A lot of stuff I don't interact with very well right now.
As Ben states that he's not interacting well with what Shahar's doing, and it's true. When you have conditional, powerful cards, well, they're conditional. That's that's what keeps them from being too good.
Yep.
Yeah, those spell snares are great in a counter fight.
Yeah, just not against Restoration Angels, Vendilion Clicks, and Path to Exiles.
You keep it.
It's not a good sign.
Yeah, that is correct, Ben Stark. It's not a good sign that you're being allowed to keep those 5.
Your turn.
So now Shahar just untapping so he can path without fear of Mana Leak.
Right, doesn't want to give up his spell snare here.
Yeah, there's no real reason to. You don't have a ton to do with your mana. You might as well blank the Mana Leak by untapping.
I was hoping for that. Can't say I was hoping for that.
And Shahar's even drawn the second second Path to Exile here, which gives him additional insurance.
Shahar Shenhar 1-0 up with Quad Lightning Bolt, 2-0 up with a very, very different game, and now once again, very much a third take on the blue-white-red flash mirror that we're seeing. And although Ben Stark is at 14, he's starting to look in deep trouble.
Ben can resolve a Path to Exile here through a Mana Leak if he wants to sack his lands, and that might be what he should just go for. He can't afford to take too much damage off the Angel and the Vendilion Click. Char does have a second Angel though.
Smash. 3, 4, 5, 6. Potentially. Here comes Path to Exile for the Angel.
Another thing Shahar, I'm sure, is very aware of is how many basic lands Ben has left. If Ben didn't have any basics left, I wouldn't be surprised if Shahar just snapped off Mana Leak and made Ben take 6 damage off his fetch land into shock land combination. But he knows Ben has 5 basics, and so Ben has enough left that he can afford to fetch 2 basic lands with the 2 shocks.
I'll pass turn after that.
Tech Edge and Colonnade on both sides, so those kind of cancel out. Though again, this puts more pressure on Ben. He's the one who has to avoid tapping out too much, or Shahar could sneak a Colonnade hit in, which is just about lethal by itself.
Sorry,
Ben goes to 10 here from his fetch land.
Ben also is in a position
No,
where if he sacks this other fetch
it
land,
is
Shahar
nothing
could
good, but I
look
look
and
can't
Tectonic
follow it,
Edge
so
Ben's
it's back
untapped
to your shot.
Tectonic Edge, while Ben can't use it, then leaving Shahar's Colonnade free to attack.
That's why I'm a professional Magic player.
But
now, so-
I don't think Ben is going to crack his last fetch here.
I should be a surgeon. I'm really good with my hands.
Yep.
17 10.
Stark draws and is starting to need to find very good things and soon.
You're on like 4 left.
Well, he drew a Cryptic Command. That is not on the list of bad cards.
Go.
Pass the turn. Currently a 4-turn clock.
Snapcaster Mage for Shahar.
Yeah, also very relevant. But against the 3 Spell Snares, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
If Ben would let Shahar draw Snapcaster for the next 3 turns, I think. Like, he might actually just, sign up for that plan.
Feel free.
The all Snapcaster all the time plan. Ben really just needs to find a Lightning Helix if he has many of those left, or Bolt. Just some way to kill the Vendilion Click. Electrolyze would be the optimal, but...
Pretty happy with Electrolyze, yeah.
yeah. If Ben can find Electrolyze, kill the Vendilion Click, counter the Restoration Angel with Cryptic Command, then he might be able to get back into this game.
Yeah, you said 3 things there and then followed it with Might.
Yeah.
Well, he's not quite dead yet, and he gets to see a few new cards, but I would rather be in Shahar's seat.
That is another mana leak. That's not helping him particularly.
No, it is not on the list of cards he would like.
Go.
Stark passes. 7 life away now.
Right, next fetch land puts him within two turns.
With a full 6 counterspells in his hand.
Gonna tech edge the Colonnade. Wants to make sure that that Vendilion Click unimpeded. Away it goes.
Ben perhaps thinking about, taking some sort of action. He picked up the Colonnade and a couple other lands, but decided against it.
Is that a Lightning Bolt?
I think it might be a Thundermaw.
No.
That is indeed what Shahar has. We take a look at his hand. He's got almost fully Type 2, or half Type 2 hand exactly, with Snapcast Restoration on a Thundermaw, all working together in Standard quite often.
So I haven't seen, have these players sided out their Sphinx's Revelations?
I mean, there's no way they did, but I haven't seen any.
We have literally not seen one even attempted in 3 games. And in this game, we just not seen
tried
one.
to put as much incredulousness into my voice as I asked.
I think Ben did draw one in game 2,
Okay.
but I mean, he wasn't really in a position to cast one. Maybe it was only game 1.
Would they have shaved down to 1?
No, I can't imagine that they would have.
Okay.
I mean, if Shahar's going into a Molten Rain Thundermaw Hellkite Restoration Ultra deck, I could see him doing that.
Sounds like Shahar actually took out Supreme Verdict and Lightning Bolt. So that's why we've not seen a repeat of the game 1 entertainment with the quad bolts.
Well, like we mentioned before, you did a good job. Now go sit on the bench.
Yeah. Home run by Restoration Angel. A fight from Ben Stark. Mana leak. I'm going to argue over that, says Shahar.
Ben not incredibly unhappy with this turn of events. He does get to use his counters for benefit here.
He's going to 6, though.
Yep, a couple of Lightning Helix we're hearing from Sheldon Menery down on the floor in Ben Stark's sideboard. So the Lightning Helix that you said, wouldn't it be great to draw as an answer to Vendilion Click, get some life back? Well, 2 of those at least are sitting in the sideboard right now. Mana leak.
Your snares are going to counter my leaks, and if not, then your stuff's going to get countered.
Ben deciding what to mana leak. Sometimes it matters when there's spell snares flying around. You have to decide which card you actually want to counter rather than just putting it on top of the stack. In this case, I don't think it makes much of a difference, and Shahar is only at 1 mana and does not have another spell snare.
Spell snare.
I'm going to say I'm going to counter the spell snare.
So does this happen? Still.
4 cards? Or 3? No,
I
3.
have 3.
The Cryptic Command was tapping the...
It looks like it was bounce draw, or so.
Bounce draw is correct, yes.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Not a normal play out of a Vendilion Click, but desperate times. Yeah, Ben fully behind here with. Can you combine all the spell snares to counter a Thundermaw? Okay.
Remember when you drew 4 bolts?
Yeah.
Be quite nice to see a Sphinx's Revelation here for Ben Stark.
Yeah, if he draws Revelation and he draws, what, like 6 cards, I think that that could give him a pretty good shot, because then Shahar is kind of limited to casting a Thundermaw, attacking for 5, but Ben presumably draws answers after drawing 6 new cards.
One would think.
And he might even be able to draw 7. He actually drew a land off that whole interchange as well.
So we're back into working out what is on the top of a deck, and on this occasion it is for Ben Stark. Draw that card. That's Cryptic Command. It is certainly not a Sphinx's Revelation.
No, but it is not too far behind.
No.
It's one of the answers he has to stay in this game.
So there's what Shahar Shenhar has to work with. Snapcaster, click, the Hellkite, pass
Right.
to exile, and
The
Malik.
Hellkite, which if he can somehow connect with that,
Yeah,
wins
that is
him the game.
Pass the turn. Pass the turn.
Time to pick a fight with a Vindulian click here, which will elicit a response from Ben, since he can't just let Shahar take the cryptic command.
Click on the turn.
So again, Ben's going to need something very good here.
Counter draw.
Counter draw.
Shahar has the Snapcaster, but doesn't really pull
Does he
up
have
anything too relevant right
yeah,
now.
a target that he really cares about.
No.
Blueprints. Yeah.
Oh,
Draw.
that's a big card for Ben there.
It's Teferi Mage of Zalfir, which is a good card in this matchup, but if Shahar actually just goes for the Thundermaw, he just wins. He doesn't necessarily know that, but
He's drawn a Sphinx's Revelation.
we have
Shahar.
verified that he hasn't cited it out.
He knows about the 3 spell snares.
But he doesn't know what Ben drew off Cryptic Command.
No, indeed.
So
But wait, he's flicking it to the front of the pack.
Is this the moment where Thundermaw thunders more and takes Shahar Shenhar into the final of the World Championship? Let's find out. Teferi.
Pass the turn.
Yeah.
looks like he passed the turn. I think the main reason Shahar would have passed the turn there is he drew Sphinx's Revelation. So he actually drew another card that basically wins him the game. He'll pass one more turn, cast Revelation, Ben presumably counters it or will probably lose, and then Shahar gets to win the game with Hellkite.
So there is Sphinx's Revelation. We didn't get through the whole match without one resolving or being fought over. And Revelation is going to draw Shahar Shenhar a ton of cards. Look at that. You just feel so powerful when you resolve one of those things. It's got an entire new hand of 7.
But that's a Cryptic Command.
15. Go.
Pass the turn, says Ben. The youngest of the 16 in the World Championship could be the first through to the final.
Most of Shahar's turns start here by casting Path to Exile on Teferi. He forces you to play all your cards as sorceries, makes all your counterspells do nothing. It's hard to like present much of a threat, whether real or not, with Teferi in play.
So there it is. I would like to send your legend away.
And Ben has to. Does he have to Cryptic Command this?
No, I think that Ben
He can't. Right?
Ben
Because
has to just let it go. I mean, he can fight over it, but his only problem is Shahar has a lot of cards in hand, and I guess Ben's hope is to, if he cryptics Shahar, he knows Shahar can't do anything. That is the advantage of fighting here. And if he draws a Revelation off this, or a Snapcaster, then he can presumably fight Shahar's next card as well.
So Shahar 6 mana to play with.
If Shahar didn't go for Thundermaw against one unknown card, I'm not sure if he'll do that after Ben's seen cycled through a few more. He may. I mean, it's kind of hard to resist the temptation of just winning the game right away.
Well, he's also in a just much worse position now that so many of his cards have been, rendered useless.
You look at this mana leak and you realize it actually doesn't have text on it with Teferi in play. Another reason just to cast Thundermaw in general, though, is it costs so much mana that by casting it, even if it's countered, you then next turn can cast multiple spells in the same turn, whereas it's really hard to present Thundermaw and multiple cards.
Thundermaw Hellkite.
I think we might see a Snapcaster buying back Revelation and then, or Cryptic Command and then bouncing the Snapcaster.
Snapcaster, counter, bounce the Snapcaster.
This game has turned around completely.
Yes.
Just.
Really on the back of, I think, Teferi.
Yeah, Teferi is doing a pretty amazing job. Shahar casually slides Celestial Colony into play, but that's like an actual card here.
It's a shame you can't have 2 of them in play, really. I tried that once.
Well, it's not as disastrous as it would be before.
No. No, before it was 4-0 to PTQ and very, very bad.
Second Teferi end of turn, ratchet up the pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to finish him quicker.
There is another Hellkite. Well,
Shahar knows he's facing down multiple cryptic commands here, because Snapcaster Cryptic with 2 cryptics in the yard, Ben can kind of go infinite. He can cast. It looks like he has enough to cast one of the cryptics with Snapcaster, and then the second time maybe Snapcaster something else. Pressuring with Colonnade is a good move, though.
does that bait out the cryptic command actually here?
Well, it's kind of like casting Thundermaw. You know, it takes a ton of mana. It takes 5 plus the Colonnade. But what it does do is it pressures Ben. Ben's only at 5. He can't really afford just to take the hit. So it's kind of like forcing Ben to cast a spell with a land instead of using your 5-drop haste creature that will win you the game if it resolves. Assuming Ben hasn't found a path by then.
Inside of combat.
So Shahara said, well, I'd like my Celestial Colonnade to punch you in the face repeatedly. And Ben has said, well, how about this Snapcaster Mage? And then just sorting out his mana. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Your hand and I'll traffic.
He bounces the Colonnade and is going to draw a card.
And part of the reason there is that he's got the second Snapcaster in hand, so and only 1 cryptic left anyway. So he might as well see a new card and try to dig to Revelation.
1 and 1. 1, 2.
The comeback begins.
And he drew a Tectonic Edge, Ben did, so he does have an answer to the Colonnade moving forward. I like letting Electrolyze resolve here. You've got, again, bigger fish to fry with your Snapcaster Mage in hand. Thanks to Teferi, Snapcaster Mage now is Flash, but...
12. Do you have 5 cards?
I have 6.
6 cards.
Okay.
Snapcaster Mage for Shahar. A slightly slower, dumber Snapcaster Mage.
Right, and here goes the Hellkite, charging in. Well, attempting to. I would be surprised if it actually, like, resolved.
Yeah, do you bounce your Snapcaster again here?
Under that.
Ben has enough mana that he can just keep recycling Snapcasters as long as he has Cryptics. I mean, he's out now, but the Snapcaster is still better than a random card. And Teferian play makes that an especially safe play.
Go.
3 cryptic commands exiled now for Ben Stark.
Shahar's running low on resources. He's down to a Snapcaster, a Colonnade, a Mana Leak, and then looks like a second Snapcaster he's drawn for his turn.
End of your turn.
End of your turn, says Ben. 1, 2, 3.
Looks like he's just
Maybe not.
potentially electrolyzing Shahar. Looks like maybe deciding against it. He knows he's safe from Vendilling Click end of turn, so I think just electrolyzing is good.
End of your turn.
Ben really wants to find a Sphinx of Revelation here. I bet Ben wouldn't mind a Hellkite of his own.
Yeah, what he found was Celestial Colonnade. In comes Teferi.
And Dispel was a good draw too because it actually stops the path to exile that Shahar might play off a Snapcaster Mage. Or whatever it is Shahar might play after Snapcaster Mage. We're all running on instance here.
Tectonic Edge takes out Colonnade.
Ben getting dangerously close to dying to these random electrolyzes just like he did in game 1.
And we know he doesn't have much in the way of Lightning Helix to come back. Those 2 are gone from the main
He
deck.
does have a lot of spell snares, though, for those Snapcaster Mages, so...
Yeah.
Is an Electrolyze.
Yeah, Shahar is aware that Snapcaster Mage is not going to do a whole lot here.
No, not letting you do that.
And one of the reasons Ben might want to counter Electrolyze here, even though it's not lethal, is it makes future Electrolyzes lethal and draws Shahar cards. So once the Electrolyze resolves, it gets to the point where, well, there you go.
Yeah, Shahar was at 7,
So Snapcaster Electrolyze was what Ben was representing there. That was a pretty amazing
Nothing
game.
you did was wrong.
That is just extraordinary because we really felt we were pretty much putting the nail in the coffin for Ben. And then back he came.
I mean, there was a window where if Shahar plays the Thundermaw Hellkite, he wins the game.
And that's the really tough part about games like this is like you don't have knowledge. We know,
yeah, no.
like we knew game one Ben was putting himself dead despite an amazing hand.
Right.
But Shahar did have a Thundermaw that he could have gone for it, and you just didn't know that Ben had no answer.
Well, there was no doubt that a card that in the end became very critical, a lot had to happen first, was Snapcaster Mage. And this is a card that's been in such a Herculean amount of work. Why don't we take a look at the little 2-1 that does so much for both players here. The players heading into shuffle and perhaps some new sleeves coming up. But Snapcaster Mage just was tremendous in that game. And cheapness is such an important thing, BDM, and just Magic generally. When you see a lot of powerful cards, cheapness is just great for you.
Yeah, I don't know what standard players are going to do when this rotates out upon the release of Theros. I mean, you see this card in Standard, you see it in Modern, you see it in Legacy. It's just, I mean, it's one of the most important cards that we've seen printed in quite a while.
And I never thought Dark Confidant would be dethroned from the title of Best Invitational Winner, but I think Tiago actually did. We've got Snapcaster, which has been absolutely incredible in all the major constructed formats, like the slide says, but also just the way it changes the games, how they play out, is pretty dramatic. We saw there, the underutilized Snapcaster cryptic command loop, but even just Snapcaster throwing off your opponent's math when it comes to anything is just very, very valuable.
Right, because it's so much about like just getting your opponent, you have some knowledge of their hand, you try to get them to get cards clear, like if I know he's only got 2 cryptic commands, I really want to get clear of them, and they're in the graveyard, and then oh, no, we still have one.
I think also it's very, very interesting. We talked earlier about this idea of perhaps players play less control matches just because of how long they take to one degree. It's also that a card like Snapcaster Mage forces you to interact in your thought process with the graveyard, and that isn't something that a ton of Magic cards do, and an awful lot of players go through a large proportion of their games basically thinking, well, the graveyard's just where cards go once they're finished with, and Snapcaster says, yeah, they're not finished with, they're just waiting their turn.
I mean, split cards have always been very popular and very good. Everyone loved Fire as soon as they saw it, but Snapcaster kind of makes every card in your graveyard a split card. It's a Snapcaster Mage, and the other half is every single instant or sorcery in your graveyard.
Right, which we've seen go all the way up to Sphinx's Revelation. You've seen players, flash it back with Snapcaster Mage. I think it's also interesting that Snapcaster Mage is able to go into like aggressive blue-red decks as well as control-y blue-white decks.
Yeah, there's a pretty good legacy burn deck that has Delver and Snapcaster Mage and Brainstorm, and then just a bunch of Lightning Bolts, Chain Lightnings, that sort of thing, because Snapcaster works very well with Lightning Bolt and Lightning Helix, as Ben and Shahar have demonstrated.
Yeah, good job by Scavenging Ooze this weekend, actually, in terms of, we talked to at least one team that played only one Snapcaster Mage in their standard deck.
And that was actually Ben and his cohort.
Right, yeah, Ben and...
it's like Martin, Yuya, Shuhai, and Stanislav Sivka.
Yeah, they cut down to one Snapcaster Mage because they were so concerned about drawing just a 2/1 haste creature.
Yeah, which is already, like I said, a fairly good deal.
So we're here in the first semi-final of the World Championship 2013. Hall of Famer elect Ben Stark, 2011 Pro Tour Paris champion. There you see him on the left of your screen, member of Team Channel Fireball. And he is still up against it, but there was a point at which we thought that chair might be empty and waiting for our second semi-finalists, Reed Duke and Josh Utter-Layton. And that is not the case. Stark has come back to 2-1 behind. He started the comeback. And then his opponent, 19-year-old Shahar Shenhar, the Israeli national champion this week here at the World Magic Cup, now in the top 4, showing no sign of nerves. I mean, he's played fantastically all weekend long and continues to when there's just one very lonely table in the feature match area. And again, Luis, you've been there because we do take the tables away until there's nothing left standing, pretty much. You see in the background, that's our kind of emergency route in case they were still in game 1.
They're threatening.
Right.
Yeah.
Their games have been relatively fast. There's definitely players I can think of that, you replace Ben and Char with, other people, and we're still on game 1 here.
And even like one player can bring
Right.
one player who plays very deliberately and can bring both players down to that, not down to that level, but just to that speed of game.
I mean, you can only play as fast as your slowest player.
Right.
But in this case, that is not a concern.
Yeah, you talked about Shahar being 18. So realize, I think he's over 100 pro points now. Is that correct?
Yeah,
I'm
he
just double-
he voted for the Hall of Fame
Yeah,
this year,
yeah.
so I know he is.
So he's under the new voting eligibility. He's not going to be. He's not quite yet eligible for his class in the Hall of Fame, but he's going to be the first player in the 2020 class.
One can only hope.
Yep, 112 career pro points for him, 11 already this season, this very young season.
Adding another good amount. I mean, I don't recall his exact record in the Swiss, but he will end up with quite a big boost, coming into the first stretch of the year.
Yeah, because it's 1 point for each win in the Swiss over that 12 rounds, and then 2 today. So there was a theoretical 16 points available. Realistically, you thought it'd be quite a lot less, but Reed Duke, well, he absolutely dominated in the Swiss, and he is heading towards 13, 14 points if he can pull it off this afternoon and evening. Just a quick time check for you. It is 10 past 5. 10 past 5 here in Amsterdam, and that means around Europe, a lot of you, 10 past 5, 10 past 6 in the evening. Back in the United States, it's round about lunchtime on the East Coast, where BDM you're from. If we go further back to California, we're talking around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning for them. And then, of course... Morning, indeed. And then New Zealand, for example, who had earlier on, they were in the top 8 of the World Magic Cup. Well, they're 11 hours ahead of us. So you do that, and they're 4 o'clock tomorrow morning already. They're into Monday. And we've still got the rest of this, the semi between Reed and Josh, and then the final of the World Championship to come. Don't you dare go away as you see the two players. Shahar Shenhar, 8 wins already at this event, so 8 pro points in the bag.
There's been 3 games played, and we both feel like we punted all 3.
It's funny because both these players are playing so well and played so well to get here, but then, Ben's right now discussing how him and Char feel that the true quote-unquote winner of each game could have been the other person had the plays been different.
But it's always interesting to hear someone refer to that as a punt. I mean, they made they do make a decision.
Right.
It's not like you forgot to draw a card or you
missed a trigger of some
sacrificed
kind.
a land when you were at 1, or what are the things that you really think of as punts? They're just you take a route and then sometimes it's not correct. I mean, Ben was like, I think he might have as many as 3 bolts. He didn't put them on 4. That's not a mistake.
Well, the great John Finkel has said that there's only one play, there's only one correct play, which is obviously an exaggeration. I don't think you would necessarily say that's true in all cases.
John is not prone to exaggeration at all.
No, never. But Ben does take that attitude. Ben's line on when a game is punted is pretty strict. I mean, I have full confidence that when I talk to him after this, he's going to say that he punted game 1.
Well, I mean, I think you heard it when he said, I only put you on having 3 of those bolts. Now, there you look at Ben Stark's numbers.
Very proud of the first number, which is that he's 29 and not 30. It's coming soon, Ben. Don't worry.
Oh, I thought it was this week. I think I accused him of being 30 on air.
No, he'll be joining me soon. A fact that he, does not like me pointing out.
300 pro points is coming this weekend as well.
Also a momentous change.
Is that how that works? You're supposed to get 100 points for every decade on Earth?
Something like that.
And you see, closing in on 500 match wins at Grand Prix as well. No wonder he's got 10 top 8s. Just tremendous record there, 65%, and hovering right around the sort of benchmark figure of 60, where you just think, yeah, that's well and truly elite standard at Pro Tours.
And Ben's last season in Grand Prix was very good. He actually didn't attend a lot of the Grand Prix just because he doesn't actually like traveling as much as you might think. But the ones he did go to, he did very well in, which is why he was here at the World Championship.
I think we've all been there. We like being at Magic events, but you don't always like getting
the intervening if clause, as it were.
So we gear up for Game 4 of a maximum 5.
So these players have been really good about staying hydrated, but I'm impressed that we haven't seen them take any dehydrating breaks.
They knew what they were getting into. They've had a lot of practice. Or maybe they don't want to have they have pity here. So it looks like
5.
yeah.
Did a little sideboard.
Not only 5, but peeking ahead in the game preview, Shahar has a Molten Rain in his hand. Molten Rain is especially effective against a 5-card hand.
And by the way, this is the first game of this series where Shahar gets to go first.
Yes.
You know, Ben was the higher seed coming in, so he started game 1. He lost the first 2 games, so he was on the play for all of those. This is the first game where Shahar gets to kick things off.
There's a sense down on the floor, just listening to some of the back chat in my ears, that Shahar feels like he's in pretty good shape, not just because of the fight, but he's looking chipper, and that, I mean, you would with that Molten Rain, because you have to think that Ben's going to keep any kind of 2-land hand, maybe.
Yeah.
And you can see him scanning the crowd a little bit, maybe like he's looking for where his dad is or his brother is.
I mean, you don't have to see Shahar to know you do mentally pump the fist when your opponent rolls to 5 in situations like this. Like
Sometimes not even mentally. Sometimes
yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't be human if you didn't just have a little bit of, well, just optimism. Let's even put it like that. Just, hey, wow, you know, I mean, this is a great player, and maybe I'm going to get some help here.
Although, of course, you know, maybe that little bit of fear creeps in. You're like, oh, I don't want to be the guy who loses this when my opponent mulligans to 5.
And Ben does have a mana leak for the Molten Rain, so it looks like we're going to have an actual game, because Ben does have a couple lands, he has a mana leak, and these games, if they go long, it does negate the fact that someone mulliganed pretty effectively.
And it's not precisely that they get the card back, is it? It's just that with each passing turn, the one card matters less and less as a percentage of the game.
Exactly. When you're at 5 versus your opponent 7, they have a significant percentage advantage on you. When you're at 15 to your opponent 17, this is not quite the same thing.
So Stark has land number 2, and Shahar, we think, will attempt to put one of those 2 land in the graveyard. Let's see if that's what
if you sided in Molten Rain, you're going to cast Molten Rain. I would not anticipate them siding it in and then not going for it when you have the opportunity.
So here we go.
I mean, even if it just draws a mana leak out, that seems like a fine use of a card, right?
Yeah, it's still very reasonable. Like again, for a card that you primarily put in the sideboard to fight against a Valakut decks, I'd imagine, having it do double duty in the control matchups is a good thing. Uh-oh.
Yeah, so that uh-oh is because Ben Stark has passed on a chance to lay a 4th land, because he obviously, therefore, does not have one. And that is another Molten Rain drawn by Shahar Shenhar.
Interesting to see what he goes for here. He can go for either Molten Rain or Thundermaw Hellkite here.
Oh, boy.
He's also even got Snapcaster Molten Rain if he wants to go down that route. So he's got a wealth of options. I think playing Snapcaster is probably the 3rd of the 3 plays, just because it dies to Spell Snare. So you might as well force Ben to have another copy of Mana Leak here.
Just going to go straight out and say, I want that gone. And by the way, you can take 2. But it's those first 3 words you see on your screen. Destroy target land. Can Ben Stark do something about it again?
He's going to cycle Shadow of Doubt here.
Yeah, that's his best play. I mean, he's got to draw a card. And another Cryptic Command, which, as good, welcome as it was last game, is really not what he's looking for now. So
Shenhar passes the turn. Is there a land there for Ben Stark?
It's not Pyroclasm.
There is
Pyroclasm,
not.
interesting. He really wanted more interest in Vendilion Click, I suppose.
But do you see now Snapcaster into another Molten Rain? Is that feasible here?
No, I would prefer to just play the Thundermaw. It does get run into by Path decks, though, so it's not an easy decision. But I think Snapcaster is getting stopped by Spell Snare is, again, something you really like to avoid.
Well, it resolves. Thundermaw Hellkite is in the house for Shahar Shenhar. And he's attacked once with it. And Ben Stark passes the turn again. No land for him.
Pursing his lips.
Yeah, this is not going well for Ben, especially with Cryptic Mana Leak in hand. We've got a finalist.
Still no, yep. Teferi draw for Ben Stark.
Draws a pass. You have a counterspell?
Do you have a counterspell? I really do. There's the handshake. A 19-year-old Shahar Shenhar, the Israeli national champion, the man who splits his time between Jerusalem and California, takes it down. He defeats Ben Stark by 3-1.
I boarded in.
Hi there, welcome back. We were just listening to the players there. They were straight into the post-match analysis.
Yeah, I mean, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well done to Shahar Shenhar. It felt like never quite got off the ground for Ben Starr. I mean, terrific to win that game 3, but particularly game 4. Ugh, pretty brutal.
Yeah, that was rough. I mean, he might have had access to another game had he played differently game 1. That's something I'm sure he'll be thinking about and probably willing to talk to you about if you're ever interested.
I'm sure he will. Now, we knew that whatever the result here, we were going to see a blue-white-red flash deck into the final.
That we know.
What do these two players, and now this one player, Shahar, what does he want to see out of the second semi-final?
Oh, he definitely is rooting for Josh here. Just as much as Reed was rooting for Shahar to beat Ben, Shahar is rooting for Josh to beat Reed.
Yeah, the big difference between Ben Stark's and Shahar's list as far as sideboarding was Hallowed Burial.
As well as wear and tear even.
Yeah, and so, Shahar just doesn't have any answers for Reed Duke's deck.
Yeah, they played in the Swiss. It was lopsided. I think they play tested maybe a little. Maybe they've just speculated. Either way, neither of them really think the matchup is in Shahar's favor.
So Stark is gone and Shahar is through, and that means we now have the 2011 Magic Online champion, Reed Duke, up against Josh Layden. But we want to hear from the man who's got himself through into the final. So I think that'll be along shortly. Again, BDM, I don't want to harp particularly on the 19 because an age is just as old as you are. But the poise of Shahar is what constantly impresses me. He is essentially nerveless.
Yeah, his father even commented on that.
Really?
That he thinks it's kind of remarkable how composed his son is when he's playing Magic. I don't know if that implies that he's not as composed away from the table.
Well, I've played a fair amount of Magic with Shahar, but I've also spent a lot of time outside of Magic with Shahar, and he is very different. I mean, he is very much the 19-year-old outside of Magic. When he plays Magic, he could just be anyone, and he's very focused and very composed.
And one of the things we were talking about earlier is I do think that a lot of that comes from the fact that, when there was a time where I think Magic had a reputation, or the Pro Tour had a reputation, as a lot of young, brash kids running around, making it a little bit unpleasant almost. But they were the only kids there at the time, and I think people have grown up in the game. You've grown up with the game. John Finkel's grown up with the game. William Jensen's grown up, et cetera, et cetera. Ben Stark, and providing these role models and going, no, don't do that.
Well, you're going to see a pretty unusual interview now, because usually the winner stays on and smiles, and the loser goes and licks their wounds in the corner. You're going to see both of them right now on the floor with Sheldon Menery.
Hey everybody, Sheldon Menery down here in the feature match area with Shahar Shenhar and Ben Stark. So you asked specifically for Ben to be here during this interview. Why is that?
Well, we were staying in the same room together. We took this tournament pretty casually. Like, not this tournament, but the top 4 of this pretty casually. And, we're good friends. So I think you should be here.
So let's go back to game 3 for just a second. There was a little bit of window where it looked like you might want to play the Thundermaw Hellkite and just kind of go for it, but you chose to take the conservative route. What were you thinking right there?
Yeah, once I drew the Revelation, it felt like I should wait and not play the Thundermaw there, because if he plays the Thundermaw, if I play the Thundermaw and he Cryptics it and then he Revelations, he has a lot more lands than me. I'm in a really bad position. I'd probably just lose that game. So once I drew that Revelation, I figured it would better to wait. End of turn Revelation, untap Thundermaw.
All right, so Shahar's pretty young. Oh, Ben's got a comment. Yeah.
No, his play was definitely right. Like, if you have nothing else to do, then you play out the Thundermaw, but because you can't really bluff anything in that kind of a spot, because I have to do things. But since he had a second best option in Revelation, you definitely want to play that first. You don't want to give me the opportunity to deal with the Thundermaw, like he said, and then Revelation and get my own things going.
All right. Yep. There's a follow-up.
One more thing. I said I was going to end of turn Revelation. I wasn't going to end of turn. I was going to upkeep Revelation for 4, but yeah.
All right. So Shahar is relatively new to the big stage. You've been around a long time. What advice are you going to offer him going into the finals?
I don't think he needs too much advice. He's really calm, really collected. Those are the things that, I guess young players worry about. He's a great player. He's just just play it like it's round 1. I mean, which I think he is. So I don't think he really needs my advice.
All right, there it is. Good luck in the finals. From the feature match area, I'm Sheldon Menery with Shahar Shenhar and Ben Stark. back to the booth.
Yep. He doesn't need the advice. He's going to be calm. He's going to be collected. He's going to treat it like round one. And then at the end of it, someone's going to give him a check for 40,000 US dollars.
Right.
It's just like kitchen table magic. No, it isn't. And that's what's remarkable. I can't stress enough. If you never had the chance to be at one of these events, they are just, it really is very, very different. Apart from anything else, we don't have a news desk to throw to, and that's where we're going right now. We'll be back with the second semi-final of the World Championship. Reed Duke, Josh Layden. Don't you dare go away. Meanwhile, back to the news desk. Zach Hill, Marshall Sutcliffe.
I assure you, Rich, the news desk is here. It is alive. It is well. I am on it, along with Zach Hill. Zach, there it is.
Yeah, I mean, that was a crazy match. That was a marathon of a match. I don't know if I could sit at a table and play Magic for that long. Much less play one single match.
And those two guys play pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot slower players at that, and even then it lasted for quite a while. Let's take a look at our bracket here we've got for the World Championship. There they are, the top four. And as you can see, Shahar Shenhar moving into the final. 19-year-old Israeli national champion looking to solidify a world championship. So let's take a look at our next matchup. You can see it right there. Reed Duke versus Josh Layden, both from the United States. Reed Duke, we've been kind of talking about his redemption status here as he's come back from a disappointing finish in last year's World Championship. Josh Layden, he is the player of the year coming into this event. Let's take a look at their deck lists here.
All right, so what we're taking a look at, Josh is playing essentially Junless Jund. Sorry, it's not Jund, it's Redless Jund. It doesn't have bolts, just a black-green deck. It's kind of like the Rock, but with a lot lower curve than certainly the original Rock, which is playing things like Deranged Tournament. It's a black-green mid-range deck that airs toward the cheaper end. It's got Deathrite, Shamans, Thoughtseize, Inquisition, Liliana the Veil to go along with incredibly powerful, inexpensive threats like Scavenging Ooze and Tarmogoyf.
Now, I felt a little bit of emphasis on Liliana of the Veil there from you.
Yeah, well,
is there any reason, given Reed Duke's deck?
There potentially is. Reed is playing green-white hexproof, which is straight constructed staples like Slippery Bogle and Delayed Cover Scout, and yes, Unflinching, I guess that's a real one. Daybreak Coronet, we don't see a lot. But yeah, the idea
So how does this deck work? Yeah.
The idea behind his deck is you play one of 12 threats, a Glade Cover Scout, a Slippery Bogle, or a Core Spirit Dancer, or you fetch up a Dryad Arbor with one of your lands that can get a forest, and you put as many enchantments on it as possible, hoping that your opponents aren't going to be able to interact with that before you kill them.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is this deck is going to demand certain answers.
Right.
There's not that many of them around, and opponents that don't have those answers are really going to get stomped by this thing.
Exactly.
Now, does Josh have any of those answers?
Yeah, so Josh is probably the worst matchup for Reed in the top four here, certainly. He's got 4 copies of Liliana the Veil, which can straight up just cause, even though your creatures have hexproof, Liliana doesn't care because she makes you sacrifice them.
Right.
So that's a really powerful way to interact with Reed's creatures. Now, Reed, of course, if he has a sack land up, can try and get a Dryad Arbor out to sack in response to Liliana. So there's a little bit of a back and forth there, but certainly more interaction than most decks have. The other thing that Josh can do is use Abrupt Decay and Maelstrom Pulse to contain the enchantments that are actually killing him. It's not going to be Hyena Umbra and Spider Umbra that kill you. It's going to be Daybreak Coronet, it's going to be Ethereal Armor, it's going to be Rancor.
Yes.
Right? And you can't really do a lot about the Rancor, but you can do a whole lot about the Daybreak Coronet, the Unflinching Courage, and the Ethereal Armor.
That's right. Now, when it comes to Josh's side of the table, he's very much playing the control route here.
I mean, I think it's hard to say. I mean, he's playing control in the sense that I think he's got a little bit slower of a deck, but this is not really a classical matchup. I mean, he can certainly just kill Reed very quickly between Deathrite Shaman, Tarmogoyf, Dark Confidant. He wants to remove Reed's threats, but it's not as though he's going to be sitting back and taking forever to do that. I think this matchup is going to be decided decided by key points of interaction relatively early in the game.
Okay.
Although, theoretically, it's possible it's a match like we saw earlier against the standard hexproof deck, where he just wins the fairway. I mean, if Reed isn't gaining life off of the Daybreak Coronet or the Unflinching Courage, I mean, Josh can put a lot of damage on the table between the cards we mentioned earlier, plus Treetop Village.
Tarmogoyf.
He's got Tarmogoyf, Scavenging Ooze, Deathrite, Shaman, Dark Confidant, and he can just stay alive with Scavenging Ooze targeting creatures. He's also got Thoughtseize, Inquisition of Kozilek to take some of the more powerful cards and more meaningful enchantments out of Reed's hand.
Yeah, I was looking at the list, and that actually occurred to me as well. The Thoughtseizes and the Inquisitions. Now, Josh has 6 of those total. And when I looked at the list here from Reed Duke, there's actually 2 key creatures, right? Gladecover Scout, Slippery Bogle are the 2 really tough. They're the ones with hexproof. So they're the ones that he can just freely stack things up on. But when I look at the rest, those are all targetable.
Exactly. Yeah, you can target a Dryad Arbor, although it's harder to interact with because they can fetch it out at end of turn. You can target Core Spirit Dance, you don't really care about it. But yeah, if you Thoughtseize or Inquisition, for example, a Gladecover Scout, Reed keeps a perfectly reasonable hand of land, scout, a bunch of enchantments. If you Inquisition that away, Reed is going to be doing a lot of nothing for a long time.
I looked at so many of these cards in here, the Rankers, Hyena Umbra, Spider Umbra, the Daybreak Coronets, the Unflinching Courages. If there's no valid target for those, they're all just dead cards.
They're literally sitting in your hand doing nothing.
Right, and so it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out because, of course, both the Slippery Bogle and the Gladecover Scout, they're 1-drops. So if Reed's on the play, I'm assuming that his mana base is set up so that he can always have that untapped mana.
Essentially,
for that turn. And Josh's Inquisitions and Thoughtseizes are going to be a lot worse.
Yeah, winning the coin flip, very important for Reed here.
Yeah, now I'm not sure actually. I honestly, I don't know who's paired ahead of each other here. Who's
that's
seated
right.
ahead
There
of
is
each
no
other.
coin flip.
Yeah.
It's all about seeing, as Rich keeps telling me.
Well, now that was different, but I do know what you're saying for sure. So that's going to matter a lot, especially on these long 5-game matches where, I think we're going to see some games where Josh is on the play, Inquisitions takes away a Bogle,
and then it just
falls apart from Reed's side.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that Reed is playing 4 copies of Leyline of Sanctity in his sideboard. All of the cards that we're talking about, Thoughtseize, Inquisition, Liliana, they all target a player.
Yeah.
That player is you.
That's
and
right.
then you either have to discard stuff or sacrifice a creature. So if Reed's able to get a turn 0 Leyline of Sanctity out before the game begins, it's not just as though he blanks some cards of Josh's, it's that Josh's most powerful cards don't do anything.
That's right. One of the things about hexproof is that you can get around it by just going after their hand and getting it before it's even on the table. Interesting interaction too. Leyline of Sanctity also works with Ethereal Armor.
Right.
It still counts that. Now, I'm not saying that's like the big game changer, but that's a pretty nice little synergy. Yeah. Now, on Josh's side of the table, most of the things that we've been talking about have been from the defensive angle, meaning trying to stop Reed Duke.
Sure.
When it comes to the offense, what does Josh have at his disposal?
Well, again, Josh is going to be killing you with Deathrite Shaman, Tarmogoyf, Scavenging Ooze, or Dark Confidant. He's also got Treetop Village, which is actually one of the big upsides to playing just a straight black-green deck. Not only do you get more basic lands for Ghost Quarter Path to Exile, and more things that can't be targeted by Tectonic Edge, but you get to play better man lands. Treetop Village, unquestionably one of the best lands of all time.
Yes.
He's playing essentially every format.
Absolutely.
You get to play 4 copies of these. Raging Ravine costs 4 mana plus itself to activate. Treetop Village costs 2.
Yeah.
So you're going to start being able to attack with Treetop Village a lot earlier, and you're going to be able to block in a more versatile way as well.
All right, cut Reed Duke off from any draw steps so that he can't build up the Voltron that he's trying to. All right, I'm told the players are seated. They're ready. They're in their feature match area. So why don't we head back down to the booth where Rich, BDM, and LSV are waiting to bring us the second semifinal here from the World Championship in Amsterdam.